All right. Now this is looking like it is working, which is good news. Had a little bit of a crash there before. Trying to get everything working. All right. Working. Getting it to go. Okay. Great. So welcome. Get this October score in there for you to take a look at. Great. So thanks for joining. I still haven't seen all of the people that are watching. A few people that are watching. So if you're here, shoot a comment in the comment section and let me know that you're here. Be able to comment and let me know if you can access that link with the score for October as well, which is sent in there. That's done through Eric Whitacre's website, so it's got a watermark on it, but should be enough for you to follow along. Let's see what the delay is like here. Fantastic. Jeff Humphrey is reacting to this. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Appreciate it. Glad that you're checking it out. So we're going to plow ahead through this. Looks like some people can see. Hopefully that this will work through. There we go. Hopefully we can get that posted in the event. If you can post this link into the stream of the event or into the event title, I appreciate it very much. Let me know too if you can hear what I'm saying okay. There we go. Hey Mondo, how's it going? Nice to see you. Thanks for commenting and checking it out. I think there's a little bit of a delay, so thanks so much for checking it out. I am Lieutenant Michael Flynn with the United States Air Force Band of the West here in San Antonio. I'm the flight commander out there. And as with everything else, hey, Tom Borning, how are you? Nice to see you. Thanks for checking it out. Let me know if that link works out too. So when we talk about the music, we'll know that it's working in there. Mark Reed, how are you? Excellent. And share that video. We'll get some more viewers along the way. This will also be published later on. So if you're watching this later on, based on the publication onto my stream or based on my news feed, go ahead and ask any questions you have to me through the messenger, and hopefully we can interact that way as well. So because of COVID-19, we've got some restrictions on how we're performing and how we're interacting and how we're inspiring and connecting the population out in San Antonio and further reaching. So one of my jobs and part of my mission is to honor, inspire, and connect. And so through these videos, this video series, I'm trying to inspire and connect with a large audience of band directors, musicians, players, performers, in a way that will inspire you to think about music in a slightly different way and inspire me to think about music in a slightly different way. So glad that you're here. Part of what I'm going to be doing is not only interacting with you, but also getting feedback from you about what you'd like to see in the series. For the first couple, we're going to be doing a son of set pieces, but after that, I'll have time to order whatever piece you'd like to have me talk about and be able to talk about it from there. So this week, we're going to talk about October by Eric Whitacre. So this particular piece, we're going to talk about a couple different things. We'll first talk about it's kind of a basic score study plan that I do whenever I get a brand new piece of music with no markings on it. Talk about how to start and end the piece, use of vertical space in conducting, which I'm going to be talking about a little bit, and thinking about moving within and opening up in your conducting. So it's kind of a little bit of a plan going through. There'll be a number of examples. And as I said before, there's a link up in the description to Eric Whitacre's web page where there's a perusal score. I'll put that back in there as well. So you can kind of look along. I'll make sure I'll announce where I'm doing and what I'm looking at, how I'm looking at this music. So again, there'll be lots of chances for some questions and answering. If you have some questions along the way, please go ahead and put them in the comment thread, and I'll see if I can address them as I can. Also, give us a shout out, just like Margaret Flynn. So mom's watching, which is great. Let us know where you're from and where you're watching and how you're enjoying this and what you're doing to engage your musical mind during this COVID-19 outbreak. So a couple of things that I do want to talk about first is basic elements of my own personal score study. So you get a piece of music and it's blank and you don't know what's going to be happening. So any music, this is just an average kind of, this is my ground rules of the basic elements of what I do here. So what I do is actually I use colored pencils. And the first thing that I do is I read through it like I'm reading a book. So I'm reading through this book and then, oh, it looks like this story might go here and go here. Okay. And get some major ideas about what's happening. While I'm reading through, I look for things like independent lines or meter changes or time changes just to kind of file away and then go back to it. So as I go through the first thing that I do is I go through and I mark in green all of the changes of meter. So for example, on this piece here, at A is in 3 and then 4 and then 3. And sometimes I'm not sure if I'm going to stay in 3 or 4 or 3 or change. And so I just leave those off. But things that I know, okay, this is probably going to be in 3, I mark that in there. So I go through, mark everything, all the time changes in green. The next thing I do is I mark in major entrances that are coming out of rest. So for example, this is right before A, the flute's coming in here. I use the blue colored pencil to mark that in. And I go through and I do that. Again, I miss some of them, but it gives me a general idea about the shape of what's happening. Next thing I do is I go through and I mark in red any different types of tempo markings or those horrible markings that mean crescendo or decrescendo where they're at C, R, E, S, C, ... I think it's horrible. I can't see that. So I go ahead and I mark those in. So if you're interested in having a kind of longer discussion about how a score study works for me, then let me know in the comments. Let me know, shoot me a message. Maybe that's something we can cover at a later point. It's very, very, very personal, but if you know what some other people do, you can dig in and say, okay, well, maybe I'll use this, and kind of spots of information. So speaking of spots of information, you're going to see a lot of information in this video. And some of it you may say, oh, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want to do that. That's completely fine. But maybe there's a couple of things that you say, oh, that looks great. Maybe I'll just try that just once and see what happens. And I encourage you to experiment with it. Now's the perfect time. It's just you and your mirror and your video feedback or your iPhone feedback and see what you think and what you like. So again, this is Lieutenant Michael Flynn. If you're just joining in, welcome. There's a video or a link to the study score for the piece we're going to be talking about today. And please go ahead and click on that. It's for public use, for perusal. This is all educational. And this is a fantastic opportunity to see what I'm talking about in the music itself. So within the start here, we're going to talk about a few different things. And if you've been in the stream, I'm just going to kind of go over this again for those people who may have just been joining. So this is Lieutenant Michael Flynn. I'm the flight commander with the United States Air Force Band of the West. And we're going to be talking about October today and a little bit of conducting perspective, some ideas that you might be enjoying about this and say, oh yeah, that's great. Or some ideas that might change the way your musical brain engages. So starting a piece of music. So this particular piece of music, if you look at the very beginning, and I'm looking at measure 1, 2, and 3, there's not too many instruments that are playing. And so whenever I think about gestures to start a piece of music, sometimes I think about how I would describe this piece of music to someone who's not a musician. So if it's somebody who's interested in music, they love listening to it, but they don't know anything about it, how would you describe this piece of music? Well, I might say, oh, this is very quiet, or this is a very soft entrance, or delicate. And then I use those words, quiet, soft, and delicate, to change what my conducting might be like. So if you think about talking, say, oh yeah, I'm going to be conducting this piece. If you actually speak those words out loud, frequently you'll see your hands and your body do elements that will imitate the words that you're speaking. And so you say, oh, I'm going to be doing this very delicately. Well, maybe you should start the piece by doing something like that. Or, I think this is a triumphant start to this piece. Well, maybe you should do that because it's something our body naturally responds to. So within this piece, I start this piece as delicately as possible. And it really is really neat because it uses wind chimes and clarinets at the very start of it. And clarinets do this amazing thing where they can start from almost no sound at all. So when I was working on this piece with my teacher, Dr. Catherine Rand from the University of Southern Mississippi, we talked a lot about how to start this music. And I came up with a bunch of different ideas. And she came up with a bunch of different ideas. And I brought them in and I said, what do you think about this? And she said, oh, I don't know about that. Try this or try this. And finally, we decided on something that we liked. So I'll show you a couple different options for how we started this piece. So basically, when I'm starting this piece, I'm thinking about there's just a few clarinet players and wind chimes. There's a couple clarinet players and wind chimes. So it doesn't have to be anything large. I've got my baton here as well. Try and get this in here so you can see what I'm doing. So a couple of things that we started out was starting with the left hand. Okay, so how do we create sound out of nothing? One way would be to do a nice gesture like this, or a nice gesture like this, or a nice gesture like this, opening the hand perhaps. Maybe if you start with the closed hand and open it this way. So I tried all of those elements and thought about how the players might respond to them. I'm just saying with the entrances. So something that we ended up deciding on was something like this. So we started out here, and it'll be all on the left hand. All the clarinets are going to be in the very front row over here on the left, and wind chimes are going to be in the very back. So I wanted to be able to communicate with the clarinets with my left hand, and then communicate with the wind chimes with my right hand. So it looks something like this. So I started the piece and I'm getting ready, keeping my eyes in line with whatever gesture I'm doing with my hand, so it connects eyes to hand to clarinets, and go like this. Wind chimes. Now you can't see that. I'll move the video there so you can see it a couple times. Is that the wind chimes I'm changing, transitioning from the opening over here, so connecting my eyes to the gesture, to the individual who I'm talking to, and then this one moving up here because the wind chimes are going to be standing up in the back, and I want to connect with them. So I'll move myself if I can do this. If you're the wind chimes player, I'm going to connect this baton to where you're starting your sound. So at the very opening, you go wind chimes, and off they go. So a couple of gestures like that may be something that you could experiment with. A couple of items that people might say is that, oh, well, how do you do this? I teach high school band. How are the people going to learn how to come in at that? So if you never do it, they'll never be able to respond to it. So if you give it a try and you say, here we go, we're going to start here. Here we go. And nothing happens, then you might have to say, all right, when I'm going to open my hand, that's the opening of your sound from nothing, from silence. So that's your job. You can give that a try. And then say, oh, okay, well, we'll try that. And you just breathe, open. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm laying my hand as if it's coming to an opening spot. Settling and then opening. Because sound doesn't really happen immediately by the players. I'm a trumpet player, so I know that if a conductor goes like this, I'm going to go, bah. So I'll give that a chance for the sound to settle, and off it goes. So if you have questions or comments about that, go ahead and comment on in the stream there, and let me know what you think. Do you think that that's something that might work, or if you have some questions about that, let me know. If we go ahead and continue into the oboe solo, basically what I'm thinking about is using some of this vertical space in the pattern that I'm talking about. So beat 1 doesn't have to be massive because beat 2 just happens. And the oboe comes in the clarinets. So if you make a brief beat 1 and then across, so this is in 5. So I'm going to go down, left. Sorry, I'm going to go down, left, right, left, up. So we're going to go and make almost a Christmas tree with this. You say, well, what about the people? How do they know where the beats are? They will be responsible for it because there's only a few people playing. And within their section, within the people playing, they'll make a decision about where those beats go. So you might see something that looks like this for the very opening. I'll try and move back just a little bit so you can have a nice view of it. And let me know if the view's not good too. So put it right there in the comments, and hopefully we'll be able to interact here a little bit. I know there's a little bit of a delay, but I'll get those questions eventually. So yeah, the very opening, you're the clarinet section, by the way. That's you. So here we go. Wind chimes. Thank you. And then measure 2. 1. And then back down. 1. So I'm moving upwards and using that vertical space that I can. So if you're going this direction, for example, I'll even move back a little bit further. This works out really well. There we go. I just need a little bit more space. I'll do that again. That'll be easier for you to see. So here we go. So the very opening, there's the clarinet. So that's you, by the way. Here we go. Wind chimes. You notice how that gesture connects right from the eyes to the hands to the player. And then the waves. And then wait. And they'll wait for you. And then I drag the tip of the baton. And then you move on through that area there. Hopefully that gives you an idea about some options for it. If you think about other things that might be useful along the way, let me know in the comment section and say, oh, well, the crash cymbal player would never see your cue. It's like, well, that's true, but the crash cymbal player isn't playing there. Maybe that's something to think about. How big does the cues have to be? How big do the gestures have to be? How many people are you conducting? And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in this section. So, Dave Webster, how are you? Hope that everything's going well. Thanks for checking in. And again, we have the link to the score we're going to be talking about there. I accidentally posted it twice there. That'll be very exciting if that comes through. Delete that, post that again. So that way you can access this material. You can go to this website and see what we're talking about. Okay, so I'm sure that questions will keep coming in, but we're going to move on to the next element, which is going to be ending of the piece. So I'm going to be changing all the way over, turning pages here, going towards the end here. So we have, we're looking at measure 106. And so dealing with the end of the piece and how you want to incorporate the silence after the release into the musical idea. And a lot of that has to do with how you use the releases. Hello, Brent Franklin. Stuart Johnson, hello, nice to see you too. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing all this. Caleb, welcome. It's always a supporter. So we're going to be talking just a little bit about the ends of the notes, how it's shaping. So going right to the end here, last 2 bars, we've got 2 bars of note, right? And you've got a timpani release on the downbeat. So we're going to actually hold on to this note. The timpani is holding through. So this is the last 2 bars. And the last note is here. You release on the timpani. And then come back up here for the last note, shaping it and closing it and then letting it go. Letting the note release, incorporating some of the silence in the end of it. Let me know too if you can hear what I'm saying okay too, because I'm not sure exactly how the audio is working, but hopefully it's working really, really well. So the very end of it, a lot of times there was an interview where Eric Whitacre did a little bit of discussion about the end of this. And he talks about October, the piece, like the month, ends darker than it begins and leaves as quietly as it comes. Something about moving each end of the piece in a very similar fashion really appeals to my musical brain. And it might not work for you, but it does for me, and conveying that to your group is really important. So we started the piece with the clarinets here. Oh. You can imagine the angle's a little bit different, but I'll do it from another way, perhaps this way. So your clarinet players. Oh. So the very end of the piece, and into yourself, and then touching the release. So if you're thinking about, hey, how is this? Hey, Mark Johnson, how are you? It's almost like you're at the desk in our office and helping me out. As always, appreciate it. So the release at the end is going to be mimicking the entry at the beginning based on something the composer talked about in this piece. So that way, if I'm doing this and Stuart Johnson's back there playing his trombone, he says, well, why are we doing this way? So, well, the composer actually talked about this, and I'm trying to replicate his thoughts on the matter. And so that helps you with inquisitive individuals in the ensemble who might be curious about why you're making these decisions. So we've got the last three bars, and I treat the releases of most of these the same way. We've got trombone, euphonium, tuba, timpani, horn 1 and 2, and we've got bassoons. During the last three bars of this piece, I always ask the bassoons to add a reedy color to the sound rather than dominating the sound. So the reason for that is because I really enjoy the warmth of the brass, and the reedy adds kind of almost like a gritty color to the end of it, which is really unique. So I always ask them to play just a little bit less. Within this chord, if you look at it too, it's going to be a major chord with two notes right next to each other. So for non-musicians who are watching, you've got a thing that sounds like bum bum bum, and then you've got one little crunchy one in the middle. And I asked that little crunchy one to be brought out just slightly so that you can feel that kind of resistance to, I guess, resolution. So the last three bars might look something like this. Yeah. Timpani still rolls. Timpani off. And then bring this up so that you can see here. Release. So you finish that one, and you notice where I ended up. I'm not happy with where I ended up. I'd rather have the sound be cradled a little more. This way, releasing upwards, rather than this way, releasing downwards. However, noticing that and thinking like, okay, the sound, if I was playing this, the sound would at the end of it rather than like the end of that there. And experimenting with that will help you a lot. So I'm going to go through the very last, 106. 105. This is the last page if you're following along with the scores. So now we've got the last five. Something that I concentrate on is alternating a little bit between the hands. Beat 4 of the first bar, the horns come in. I don't want that to be soaring. And so when I do soaring, I'm going to have this hand come up. And then over here, the trombones and the euphonium are going to come in after that. So I'll try and back up again here to give you a little bit of an idea about what I'm doing. I'll sing along. My singing's not brilliant, but you get an idea. So here's measure 105. Measure 105. Now here's the horn. And then pick up the trombones and the euphonium. 3. Bottom B. Timpani's still going. Release. B. Timpani. And I'll cradle that sound a little bit less. So that gives you at least some ideas about what you might do for that particular section. Another thing that I do with my practice, which if you're a band director or someone who's practicing, maintain your mood of what you're doing past the release of what you're doing. I know I've said what you're doing twice, but hopefully you understand if you're practicing an etude and it's a calm etude and you finish the end of it, and you collapse. Finish all the way through the end so that the silence becomes part of that piece. So wonderful to see everybody. Thanks for the tip on the audio, Caleb. You're always very supportive. Mark as well. Better off now I'm hearing from you, right? So Charlie Carney, how are you? Hope that you're doing great. Thanks for checking it out. If you have questions along the way, let me know. Again, for those of you who are just turning in, I'm Lieutenant Michael Flynn with the United States Air Force Band of the West. All of the links to the Band of the West and the wonderful video projects we're doing in order to honor, inspire, connect with our audience members and our community are on that website. And you can actually view that on the website or in the description. There's links to everything that you would need there to follow us. Also a link to my YouTube channel. I'm going to be posting a lot more of these videos, and this will actually go on my Facebook page. If you're watching this later on, send me your comments in the private messenger, and hopefully we'll address them in the next video. So we did at the very beginning of the video talked about starting and ending this piece. And we're going to be talking a little bit about using the vertical space in front of you and kind of expanding that and using that to indicate some dynamic contrast. So to do that, we're actually going to be moving to the middle of the piece here, moving to the middle of the piece here. This is starting into let's see, measure 49. So also this involves a portion of the piece that is very difficult, moving technically from 4 to 2 and kind of how those transition from one place to another. And it goes towards why I'm talking about this piece. You may say, why October? Why are you picking this piece? It's a piece that many of you actually may perform with your groups. And not only that, it's used a lot of times at conducting symposiums. So either you're a player or you're someone who's working on these pieces, it has something that you have a realistic opportunity to conduct. So that's why we're kind of talking about this one. So we're going to be talking about measure 49 going into E. So Chad Rose, how wonderful to see you. Hope you're getting out on the golf course still along the way. It's been a beautiful weather here. Unfortunately, our courses are closed at the moment, but we were enjoying it for a while in the eternal summer down here in Texas. So here we go, 49. This is a couple of measures where we have entrances on the and beat. And a lot of band directors will use a nice, strong gesture to have that and of one be a very specific entrance. You can do that, but have it be very gentle as well. So I'll just kind of go into the 47. Well, imagine that the euphonium solo was beautiful. And so 47 looks like this. 2 trombone and tuba, da 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 bom pi, ba da ba dum bom ba da dum ba da di dum ba dum bom pi, ba da di da di da da di ba di da dum di da. So that's the general idea about what we're going to be talking about. A couple things that I like to address in there is the gentleness, or I guess the subtlety of the coming on the end of one as well. You have tiered instruments that are going to be across the ensemble. You can do this. I'm kind of conducting everything at the camera. But for example, you might have trombones over here, and then you might have the horns over here, and then the flutes and the clarinets. With this particular piece, you have a unique opportunity for each one of those entrances to happen about 1 bar apart. So you have about 2 beats to follow through with whoever you're talking to, musically speaking, and then another 2 beats to prep the next group. So if you're looking at this and we're at 47, we're going to start with the tuba entrance. So you get 1, 2 tubas, da 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 da, and then you connect with the next group, which is horns and alto saxophone, tenor saxophones, da da da, and then over the clarinets. Follow through and then move to the next one, and this is all the low brass, da da dim, da da percussion, da da di, da dum, di da 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 di da di dum bum di da da. So a couple of things in there. Hopefully you have some ideas about some questions that you might have along the way. It's wonderful to see everybody. Wesley Young, thanks for liking this video. Thanks so much for checking it out. If you have questions, go ahead and put those in there as well. So a couple things along the lines in here. The entrance to a lot of these lines happens very quickly, and you do have time to move to another group of instruments. Frequently, when you're going to another group of instruments, it's easy to become robotic with that motion. So you get da-da-dee-da, next one. Next one. Remind yourself that some of these people are actually waiting a number of beats to come in, and they sometimes have to be reminded about the grace with which they have to enter. So the more graceful you can move from one section to another and practice that transition of rotating your body so that you're going to be changing a position to a different part of the group, so that it doesn't become something where it's just like 1 and 2 and next one and 1 and 2. So just work on that. Sometimes it's hard to do because you were thinking about how do we make sure that they come in the right place? How do we make sure that they come in at the right time? A lot of that will be taken care of if you give them the proper attention with what's happening. So how do you practice that? That's a great question. When I'm going through this particular piece of music, sometimes I'll use gigantic Post-it notes to remind me which groups of instruments come in where. Even when I'm doing this, I'm doing the score study, and each step indicates like a different level that I'm trying to layer on top of one another. So when I do this one, I have lots of post-it notes that helps me to remind myself, like, okay, so here are these instruments, and then these instruments, and then these instruments, and then these instruments. So I guess last year somebody was asking me about this and said, do you actually look at all these things and say, oh, clarinet's here when you're conducting? Actually, most of the time, this is a study technique to make sure that I practice this motion and practice knowing where those instruments go. So then when I have to put it back into context, I just am knowing, like, okay, this is where I move next. This is where I move next. And you'd be surprised how helpful it is just for somebody who's been waiting for a while to just go, now is your turn. And that can be very, very, very helpful. Okay, so we're kind of going along here. If you have any questions, again, go ahead and put them on the comment thread there. Hopefully this is helpful to you. How do we use space here? We've been working. Whoa, that's fantastic, Dana. So it's wonderful to hear from you. I actually did this piece at Sheridan College in Wyoming with Dana Prater playing French horn when I first started there, I think. So it's wonderful that you're doing it again. It's a wonderful piece. I really like it. Wonderful to hear from you. Hope Jeff's doing well. So how do we use vertical space in this? So using this space here, using this box, can be very effective in terms of volume and control of what you're doing. So for each one of these, let's take a look at it just a little bit. Yeah, so pretty close to here is E is going to be one of the first impact points of this piece. So when I'm getting into this, you're getting into a large gesture. You can actually bring this in a little bit, so it's a little bit more intimate in terms of what you're doing, and then bringing it back out in order to open up. So when I'm saying get back into yourself, in no way am I saying close off. However, to bring this circle or square of what you're doing closer in so that it connects with the ensemble, connects with what you're doing, so that this happens, so that you can not show too many points of interest. So if you're going and then back out, then everything is connected all along this plane here, which I worked on a lot with my teacher at Dr. Catherine Rand at the University of Southern Mississippi, is making sure that this stays here so that you can continue to connect what you're doing with your face. So hopefully you've got some good tips there and some information. Thanks again for sharing this video and liking this video. This is, again, Dr. and Lieutenant Michael Flynn with the United States Air Force Band of the West in San Antonio, talking about the piece October. I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the video again for the study score for this, so you can follow along. You can access that. You can see what we're talking about. This is for those of you who are just joining or maybe joining in a little bit late. The next thing we're going to be talking about here is making sure that you have an idea of how to transition from hand to hand. So, for example, you might have measure 61. 61 is what we're going to be looking at. You might take your right hand for the baton to connect with the alto saxophones and the horns, which perhaps might be in the center of the ensemble or on the right of the ensemble. So, in other words, in the center of the ensemble or the right ensemble. So I'm just changing my body so you can be the saxophones and the horns. And then reconnecting with your left hand with the clarinets. So let's assume at measure 61 that you're already in 4. Okay, let's assume that you're already in 4. And you're coming out of this, the euphoniums have just finished their very nice line, and you're going to continue onwards. So at 61, you have 1, 2, 3, and then saxophone and horns. Young clarinets. So that's just transitioning, moving one hand to the other. And you may say, well, how are the alto saxophones going to know where to cut off if you don't continue to beat time with the right hand? Well, time transitions over to the left hand. And if they're paying attention at all, then they'll know when to stop, because they'll see the beats continue. So you'll see what I'm saying here is there's 61 again. So you have 61, 1, 2, 62, horns and saxophones, clarinets, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then drag and take your time. So I'll go ahead and do that again. You can get an idea about how I'm transitioning from one hand to another. Now, if you don't have a lot of practice doing this, now's a perfect time to experiment with the independence of your hands and how that might work, how it might look, how you can smooth out some of the awkwardness within it. Keep in mind that if you keep the beat going in both hands, for example, if you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, and you connect beat 4 along the same plane with which you're conducting in the right hand, the individuals in the ensemble will know where beat 4 is, even if it's not given in the right hand. And that's okay. Both of the hands don't have to be continuous motion the entire time. So I'll do this again. Here's 61. So 61 is here, and the entrance with the horn and the saxophones. Clarinets. There's a change on beat 3, 3, 4, 1. So it's not that I'm disengaging the right hand, but rather keeping it on the same plane and changing the concentration of what people are looking at, depending on which hand you're using and how that works. So just even doing some exercises like this, if you're just going up and down, 1, 2, 3, 4, and moving that way may be really, really, really helpful. So I'll open up here for some questions. Perhaps you have some questions about what we've seen so far. Alex Hanley, another spectacular serviceman playing his trombone. Fantastic, wonderful. Thank you for your service, sir. And if you have any questions about what I'm talking about here, and if you have some questions that about conducting in general, or perhaps this particular piece, let me know. As I'm letting the stream kind of catch up, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about recordings and how they can be used. So, do I listen to recordings is another question that people ask a lot. Is like, yes, I do, absolutely. As I'm moving into a job where almost a huge percentage of the work is done by a wonderful arranger for the United States Air Force Band of the West. He does all this wonderful work, and it's almost all unpublished or stuff that doesn't exist already. So I have to come up with these sounds by myself and in my head, and how is it going to sound? So now at the point of what I'm doing, I'm not using recordings quite so much. But if you're just starting out, like I feel like I'm still just starting out, if I'm doing something where I don't have a lot of sonic idea about the type of music that I'm conducting, I'll go and research a ton of recordings by the same composer, by the same arranger, by a similar ensemble. If it was premiered by the Cleveland Orchestra, maybe we want to listen to the Cleveland Orchestra play. Or who else has played it? What other recordings are available in that same type of style of music? Are there any videos of conductors conducting that style of music? That kind of thing. Is there any way to look or research into any other information that can be seen on the internet? And the internet's amazing for that. So, Raphael, thank you so much for your comment. It's absolutely my pleasure. So, the recordings can be really useful. Whenever I'm getting ready to do an honor band, after I've kind of selected this music and done my score study process and come up with my own musical ideas, frequently I'll actually go and listen to high school band recordings on YouTube, like someone's mom had recorded it on their iPhone. So you might say, why? Why would I ever do that? Well, it's because on those high school band recordings, you'll actually hear the mistakes that you might see in your own ensemble. And it'll kind of give you a preview as to, oh, wow, they messed that up there in measure 35. I wonder if my kids are going to have problems with it. Well, guess what? Like, your kids are going to have problems with that. That's exactly why you listen to them. So I like to listen to those. If you think about recordings for this particular piece, I like the the recording by Eugene Corporon on the Passion CD by the North Texas Wind Ensemble. The Navy Band has got a really interesting recording where it's spliced between rehearsal and concert, which I found to be really interesting. I think that some of the ideas that they have there are really unique, and I like some of the ideas of, oh, I like that, or maybe I want to experiment with that and see if it works. There's also a Philharmonic Youth Wins Singapore. It's an invitational band concert that exists, which I find really useful listening to, because you can hear it's a wonderful ensemble playing this piece with lots of different ideas about where to stretch and how to stretch this piece of music. So a lot of these elements are things that you can kind of glean from the recordings. And you can say, well, where might the difficulties lie? Well, if you listen to a couple of secondhand recordings of someone's mom or dad recording, parent slash guardian recording the stuff on their iPhone, you can learn a lot about where the mistakes might be and how this piece might be either trickier than it looks or not trickier than it looks. So recordings are something that I use as definitely as a resource. And when you look at people doing score study and you say, oh, well, you should never listen to recordings, that is absolutely an opinion that you can have. It's one that doesn't align with the way that I think about recordings, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right or wrong. But I think that when you're learning about music and you're learning about those types of music, the more verbal vocabulary, musical oral vocabulary that you can have to resource and reflect on, the better. So if you can listen to 17 recordings of music that's similar and then say, oh, I really like the way that this clarinet line was shaped, well, then that gives you more of a musical vocabulary to speak to the students about. So speaking of musical vocabulary, something that my teacher at the University of Southern Mississippi, Dr. Catherine Rand, really helped me is figuring out many different ways to do the same thing. So does the beginning of the piece look like this? Does it look like this? Does it look like this? How do you conduct it without a baton? How would you conduct it with your baton in your left hand? Let's find out. So you're going to connect it this way? Think, okay, well, this is really awkward. You think, oh, okay, well, that's another way to do it. You might not change your conducting baton in your left hand, but it changes the way that your mind engages on how you're doing these activities. And if you're thinking, oh, well, I've only come up with 3 examples, watch any professional orchestra conductor conduct any pieces that are similar, like a second or third movement of a symphony where it's really quiet or beautiful, and look at how their gestures are doing. See if what you can do to mimic those gestures. If you really like a gesture that goes like this, then do this a whole bunch and see what you think. And if you don't like it, great, but at least you found something you don't like rather than trying the same thing over and over again. So not seeing any questions come through in the comments just yet, but if you have any questions, please let me know. Also, if you're watching this video after it's been posted, this is Lieutenant Michael Flynn. I'm the flight commander with the United States Air Force Band of the West in San Antonio, and I'm here just to talk through a number of different conducting perspectives. And actually, I'd like to continue with this video series. And I'd really like to talk about a number of different pieces. And again, why did I pick October? It's a piece where you might actually do it yourself, or maybe you'll do it in a conducting symposium, or maybe it's something that you really like and it's beautiful music and something you can experiment with. So the next piece that we're going to talk about next week is actually the Cajun Folk Songs by Frank Tikelly. Now, if you have an idea about anything that you'd like to see, like perhaps you'd really like to see, I don't know, Amazing Grace by Frank Tikelly, shoot me a message or put it in the comments and we'll actually work that in. And if it's not a piece that I own currently, I'll order it and then look at it and work on it. If you're interested in the score study perspective about what I would do from a square one score study, I can go ahead and do that with you. It was just wonderful to be able to interact and connect with such a wonderful audience of people. Dan Foster, hope you're doing just brilliantly. Very, very, very good to hear from you. Thanks so much for your comment. And thanks for checking it out. If you have any ideas about what you'd like, please let me know. And if you're a player and you say, well, what about this? What about this piece? How would you conduct this? Let me know too. If it's a solo, we can take a look at that. Absolutely. So Margaret Flynn, what ability level would this piece be used with? That is an excellent question. So I think it's listed as a grade 3, right? So this piece is another one where there are stretches of the instrumentation that make it not ultra approachable for a very, very young band. However, this piece is another one where you can make some adjustments in the score in order to adapt to your ensemble. For example, if you don't have an oboe player, then don't have an oboe player play the opening because you don't have one. But it's cross-cued in the flute. So have a flute player do it. Or if you don't have a flute player who wants to do it, then rewrite it for a clarinet player. And so these options, as long as the composer's intent is actually still kind of encompassed in the piece, then feel free to do whatever you like in order to be able to perform it. So if you look at the commission level, so commission is some people said, hey, I want you to write this piece. I'll pay you to write this piece. And the composer says, absolutely, sure. So there's different high schools, there's middle schools, there's universities. So this is one of those pieces that kind of crosses the ability level. It's an excellent question. So it's one of those questions that says, well, it depends. And it's one of those pieces that there's some really high trumpet notes in it. So if your trumpet notes can't do it, then perhaps change it so that the trumpets don't have to do that, or have them play that down an octave, or see if it's something that can be cross-covered somewhere else. So got a couple of questions that are coming in here too. So Daryl, thanks for checking this out. Awesome insight. Oh, thank you. Score study steps would be nice to hear. Absolutely. So score study steps is something that we can absolutely cover and go a little bit more in depth in and how I do it, especially if there's a new piece that somebody would like to say, hey, why don't you check out, Moscow 1941 by Brian Balmages. So maybe we'll check that one out and start it from scratch and take a look at it. James Green, thanks so much for checking it out. Approach to score for the first time as well as score studying. Okay, so that's 2 comments in a row about who you'd like to see some ideas about score study. Absolutely. So next week, we're going to do it at the same time, Monday at 3 o'clock Central. And we'll take a look at Cajun folk songs. Again, why do this piece? This is another piece that perhaps if you're in high school, you might do this, or an honor band in middle school, or if you're with the band that Brian Margrave works with, you do this. Also, I'd like to thank Brian Margrave, my brother-in-law, and Kate Flynn Margrave, who's checking this out for their stream and their support. Also, my parents are checking it out too. So take this opportunity to say hello, and I hope you're enjoying. So why do Cajun folk songs? It's something that is approachable. It's something that you may do. It's something where you could use a portion of. It's something that has techniques in it in terms of conducting, in terms of gesture, in terms of musical ideas that we can use across different pieces. So that'll be next Monday. It'll be on the same channel, and we'll just do the stream the same way and take a look at some of the same ideas. It'll be similar to this one. Like this particular one, we looked at basic score study techniques. We looked at starting and ending the pieces, use of vertical space, and thinking about in and open in terms of using your gestures. So we'll come up with another list of things to do for Cajun folk songs and kind of check that out. So we got a couple of other comments in here. Oh, Melissa Evans, thank you so much for checking it out. Raphael, oh, excellent. Well, wonderful comment. This is a very long comment, but it's basically says he really enjoys it and enjoys helping me or enjoys how I'm helping the audience think about the ideas. So if you're thinking, well, I can read that myself, this is for the replay of the stream later on. If you have some more ideas along the way, we can deal with those and talk about them. Please send me private messages through the Facebook, or you can put a comment on the stream and I'll check it out. I see another one for chorale and shaker dance, Zeklik. Absolutely, that's another wonderful one that I really like, and it's one of the first pieces I did as a trumpet player that I really was like, whoa, this piece is great. And it has the ending, which is like fast and slow at the same time. It's wonderful. I love it. So last couple of items. We're trying to at the Air Force continue our mission, especially with the United States Air Force Band of the West, to honor, inspire, and connect. And if you feel like I've done that through the video, please put some comments back in there and say, thank you for doing this. It will help me and also help my bosses see what we're doing to engage the musical brains of the band director and musician community around the country. So again, thank you for checking this out. Keep engaging your musical brain. Continue practicing your stuff. Look at new scores. Listen to new music. Watch videos along with playing your video games and trying out new recipes at home. So thank you so much for checking this out. This is Lieutenant Michael Flynn. I'm the flight commander and at the United States Air Force Band of the West in San Antonio, and I'm absolutely loving it here, and I'm loving doing these videos. So I've got some great feedback. Feel free to message me if you have specific questions, or if you have comments like, oh, when you did this, I didn't really like that because you couldn't see my right hand or something. That's really, really helpful, and we'll do this again next week at 3 o'clock for chorale. For Cajun folk songs by Frank Kelly. Thank you so much, and so glad you could join the stream.